Welcome, Wisdom's Chats, Thursday. It's blustery here in Hermanus. I love this because Edward just helps us, reminds us that we have these, crossover periods. We're heading into winter, you're heading into summer. And so it's good to know we're all part of the same planet at different time zones and places. And but today we're talking money. Like we never talk about money on Wisdom's Chats. I mean, it's never a topic comes up. So it's unusual of us to be picking on this topic. But listen, it's a good one because we can't live without it, and we hate to love it and we love to hate it. So the topic today is about using money wisely. And so can we use money in a way that does good? I think that was one of the reasons why we picked up that topic. And Trevor, you were, I don't know if you can pick up that train of thought that you were sort of heading down yesterday morning, and I interrupted you and I said, no, let's pick it up tomorrow. So whether you can or you can't, I'm giving you the chance to pontificate and share a little bit more around your thinking.
Yeah, so I was on a roll at about 10 to the hour. I think we were about 50 minutes online when I got on a roll. Takes me a while to warm up, but I just need Ed to push my buttons. But I think these are very serious buttons to push because I'm constantly aware of people turning around and saying, man, I want to do this. I want to change the world. I want to do that. I want to do this. I do this. But money is an evil. In my now in my 67th year on this planet, way younger than Ed is because he's the senior in this group, I think by about 3 minutes. I have not seen too many people make significant differences without having a pool of capital behind them. Ed just, it was quite interesting yesterday that Ed gave us a link to someone just down the road from us in Fourways, based in Chartwell, who had 110 million in assets. And I said, now hang on a moment, who is this guy? And I had to go there and follow through all of his research. And it's so interesting what we are doing at the moment here, where Ed is in Cornwall, and he has to turn around and say, hey, I know about your neighbor down the road that I couldn't work out who it was. And then finally, when I got to see who Ed was referring to under a label of B corporations, which I think is fantastic, I then found out who it was. So Ed knows who we're talking about. We can perhaps put it in the chat. But what I wanted to get into was exploring, much as we push Thabiso and what's holding him back, I wanted to explore with Ed, who's at the same age group as I am, and has these really big social needs that he sees as being important to him to make an impact. And I suppose it's before he departs from this planet in the next 50 odd years or so. Child hunger, obesity, domestic violence, the natural environment. And the first thing that came to my head when Ed brought that up is, well, why aren't you doing something about it, Ed? Or if you are doing something about it, is it big enough to make a significant impact? Or does that not concern you, Ed? So, I'm doing a lot of rhetorical thinking for Ed here. Those are the questions that were going through my mind. And then I turned around and said, well, why do I participate in all of these things? And is it about, I just like getting up in the morning and getting on here? No, it's not. I have a vested interest. And my vested interest is I love growing businesses. And the whole foundation of growing businesses, you know, for me, my mantra is the business of business is profit. So you've got to be out there generating revenue. And then while you're generating that revenue, you then ask yourself, well, what do you want to do with it? So part of what I love to do with the money that actually comes in is go traveling, which we can't really do at the moment, but we can keep storing money away. And we had such an interesting Wisdom's Chats discussion in the US yesterday, where we talked US travels. It was amazing. So I could see that's where my passion is. But I can see that Ed's passion is about making a really significant difference in these 4 pillars that is identified. And I thought to myself, but I like this guy. I just don't like the way he thinks, but I do like him. How can I align my vested interest with his vested interest? And why can't we bring our passions together to align this growing a business, making money, what we do at Wisdom's behind Ed? And I'm just focusing on Ed because why not do it behind Thabiso? Why not do it behind Jasper? And Ed's got me just tongue-tied on Jasper. Why not align your vested interests together and see if you can't make something significant happen together? So I suppose this, if I go back to your first statement, it seems that money without the will, passion, and education to make it work well for you and others gets wasted. And I'm trying to bring those strands together in my vested interest thinking as to how can we take the time that we're investing into these type of platforms to have these discussions to actually grow our mutual vested interests together. And so the challenge that I'm putting to Ed is, Ed, have you thought of perhaps crowdsourcing in a big way? And can that crowdsourcing be backed up with what we do on Wisdom's Chats? And can the chamber and legacy thinking and the book legacy and various books all come together, and we all turn around and say, well, let's work together and bring a youngster like Thabiso in, who wants to, at 26 years of age, he wants to conquer the world. And he has the ability to do it. But if you can bring the experience that we have together to align our mutual interests, imagine if there's only 5 of us on this particular forum, the others are all away on holiday. They've got more than enough money to go traveling. But imagine if the 5 of us could do that, and we act as role models for 5 times 5, that's 25. And those 25 act as role models for 5 times 25, we've got 125. Very soon, after a couple of steps, we got 10,000 people in this network who can then start making significant differences in those 4 pillars: child hunger, obesity, domestic violence, and the natural environment. And why I'm bringing this up is because I think the world of business has changed, and Ed correctly brought it up. And some of my critique, I'm not going to say criticism about Ed, is I sometimes get the feeling that he's a glass half empty kind of guy, which I know he's not, but he almost opens up the discussion with, this is why I don't like the Amazons and the Facebooks and this, because they are absolutely rubbish. Meanwhile, we could actually work with their money and help them to make a significant difference if we attract some of their money the way that that group you identified in Chartwell, just down from Fourways, was doing. They went to those type of businesses and said, listen, we have got a social mission and mandate, and we'd like some money from you. And that's how they built their 110 million in assets. And I know that Ed and Thabiso can make a significant difference in what they want to do in the world if we all did this together, times 10,000 people. Now, I'm on a roll, but can I stop?
Well, we'll let you pause. Let's put it that way. And let's, Edward, I mean, he's thrown the ball well and truly into your court. You're going to have to respond in some way, and then we'll come back to Jasper and Thabiso.
Yeah, in a way, Trevor's my validation. Because I loved the way Trevor's thinking, because, you know, I brought this idea and it's created change, hasn't it? And I love that. What I found really interesting about that, and I read the article that Trevor put in the chat yesterday, and I'm not sure I'm pronouncing his name right, Pat Pillay. Really interesting. I think one thing he said was, and I totally agree with him, large-scale donor aid across the world hasn't brought about the impact and change we necessarily want to see. But he then went back to say, go back through programs, organizations and companies that have really worked, and you'll find an individual standing there that wants to make things different and happen. And I think that was a really exciting bit. I think it's very interesting what they're doing, helping young entrepreneurs. But I also, it took me off on a little sidetrack, and I'll claim the Trevor Amendment, which allows me to be sidetracked. What would the world be like if it was just entrepreneurs? Be interesting to see what happened then. And I just leave that there for people to think about, because, but yeah, I think there is this paradox that people that want to do good don't like money, and people that have money don't want to do good. And the good, or if the good they do, it merely scratches the surface. I know it's press Trevor's buttons here, but you know, you think of the impact the billionaires can make if they really, really wanted to. And again, I say, you know, how is it that we can actually fly a helicopter on Mars, but we can't feed children? That has got to be an incredible indictment of the human race. How is it that my neighbor can be killed in a domestic violence attack when we can put a man on the moon? So yeah, but I'm really excited by Trevor. And actually I picked up on one thing already, and I think, well, actually I do need to expand my horizons. And I think, you know, my do-goodiness, as Lee called it yesterday, I think, my saving the worldness, has only really come about since I finished my job of looking after my family. My family are now cared for. I still look out for my daughters, and I care about my daughters, and also because where I live is one of the most deprived areas of Britain. It's in a jewel in the crown, Cornwall, but actually the town I live in is so deprived that the life expectancy of people here is 6 years less than the average for the UK. Unemployment is way above it. Education is way below the national average. Obesity is way above the national average. Sickness, depression, actually, and domestic violence is way above the national average. So one thing I thought about actually is a forest for Camborne. There's lots of wasteland in Camborne from all the factories that have closed down, and the mines that have closed down, and the businesses that's closed down. So I thought, why not build a bloody great forest in the middle of the town for people to enjoy? And yes, Trevor, I'm thinking about crowdfunding, and I'm thinking about getting businesses involved, because they want to be seen to be green. What could be more green than putting a forest in an industrial landscape? And what can be more inspiring than not just planting a few trees like the council want to do in Camborne, but actually building a ruddy great forest in a desolate area? So yeah, Wisdoms has fired me up to do that. I'm really interested in, yes, seeing how we can use Wisdoms to get the word out, to get bigger, because I think attracting young people like Thabiso, older people with great experience like Jasper, troublemakers like Trevor, intelligent people like Lee, get more of those on board and just think what we can do. And I think we need a mix, don't we, of entrepreneurs and people that are doers. You know, the foot soldiers. You need queen bees, worker ants, if I can mix my animals. But just think what a world would be like if we only had entrepreneurs.
Imagine what the world would be like if you could actually press the mute button at the right time. I mean, this is inspiring. This is inspiring. I feel excited. I feel like this is the possibility. I mean, seriously, Edward, I'm behind it. I see a project. I see a ruddy great forest in an industrial landscape. Let's start with Camborne. It's specific. We can put a project together around it. Wisdoms can be on board. We can say this is our first project, a global collaboration. We're starting with Camborne. Next, it will be Alex, a forest in Alex, Thabiso.
I think you've annoyed Trevor.
Trevor.
I've just got to add in, because I thought you weren't thinking big enough, and then you just saved the day, Lee, by pointing to Alex. Because if you really want to do a global project, you twin the project. So you actually turn around and you say, hey, Ed in there with his map, and Thabiso here in Alex with his map, and then you twin it and you get global sponsorship on the twin projects. Anyway, so I'll leave that there.
Yeah. And we have planted tree days and those kinds of things, but I think the idea of a forest, actually creating a forest, it has a great feel about it, and we know that trees actually not only good for the environment, they're good for people. Anyway, we can go down that road. Very, very exciting. Will, passion, education, combining to use money wisely. We're on track. Jesper, what do you have to add?
I don't want to interrupt your tree planting project there, so I'm just being lazy. I just want to sit on the side and watch you guys dig holes and plant trees and do stuff like that. But you know, I think tree as a symbol is a great symbol, because it speaks for longevity, because trees outlast human beings, and you can make it personalized. And I was just, as it was speaking, I was reminded years ago I visited Israel, and I visited the Holocaust Museum, and they've got a garden there, almost like a forest, with for each person that was significant during the time of the Holocaust and that saved Jewish lives. The tree tell a story. So on each tree that was planted, they would then have a little plaque to say the symbol of this tree is this person who saved so many kids or did this or whatever. And the trick with that whole tree planting thing is to how do you mobilize the community to make them, give them a sense of co-ownership. So you could easily, you know, let each one dig its own hole for planting his own tree, and you get companies that just sponsor the compost and all the rest of the stuff. And then once the tree is up and running, then you put a plaque on to say this is the contribution of this family in our neighborhood, so that, you know, people are reminded that we are building for the future. So those were just ideas that came up around the symbolism of the tree. And years ago, even in my new life experience, our leader at that time had the farm in the Eastern Cape, and he built a conference center there. But that was part of our leadership's training, that we would, if we take new leaders, they would then, there would be a place where they dig a hole, and that was a hard job because it was a very rocky area. But they would dig the hole, they would then fill it with the compost and the manure, and they would plant the tree. And then when they come back, they can, look at what they've planted. So I think, yeah, the tree project can be a good symbol for going forward. But I was just thinking, when Trevor was started off by changing the society and making an impact, it's a good question, but we tend to, because the ills of this world is so vast that we, once it get our attention, we want to fix it in one day, but it took the lifetime and several lifetimes to get it to the mess that it is today. And it's so entrenched in society. You're not going to change the political system overnight. You're not going to change the economic system overnight. So how do you then impact? So I think you have to then taper the word impact to say, what can I, and I think we all feel overwhelmed when we think of the problems of this world, because we don't have the resources, we don't have the time left to fix it. But the key lies in how do we mobilize more people. And if you can't mobilize people, maybe the problem is not as severe as you think. But if you can find a way to speak to the emotions of people and mobilize people, and then for me, the key thing is, how do we build a society impact machine that, once you build the components of the machine, it doesn't matter how slowly you start, but then it is now becoming unstoppable, because it's now a machine that produces, that is dedicated just to do this one thing. And I think that's the next trick in this whole thing is take this massive thing and unpack it into doable projects, like we've now talked with the tree thing, for instance. Now, unless you do it with doable projects, and then people can understand it, and they can put their weight behind it, and they can get excited about it, you're not going to get much done, and it won't be sustainable. So I'm thinking of entities that just comes to mind for now. I don't know how they sponsored and how they funded, but someone somewhere must have had a severe problem and did something that today is still relevant. I'm asking myself this: Alcoholics Anonymous, how does it work? Who funds it? And I think it's pretty much just a group of volunteers. But because the problem is so severe in society, some people came up with a way, how can we fix it? And it's still going. And I've got people that I'm close to that had a problem with alcohol addiction, and that belonging to such a grouping helped them just to have the strength to get through it. I'm thinking of, I don't know much about them, but every now and then in a movie you see the Salvation Army playing the trumpets to gather some money. But I believe their big thing is they are providing accommodation for the homeless, where people can come in for a meal and they can have a bed and they can stay over. Now that's still going hundreds of years after whoever started it in the beginning. I'm thinking of an organization like YWAM, Youth with a Mission. They've got bases now in hundreds of countries, and sustainable, and of about 100,000 people working, about 80,000 of them are volunteers, dedicating a year or 2 years of their lives. But so you have to focus. You have to find, what is that thing that I can fix. And it brings me to that book that we all read, and that's The Tipping Point. It can be as simple as, if you have an abandoned building in your neighborhood, fix the window. Because if people see that the window is stayed broken, then next day two windows are broken. So fix a window, paint a building, cut the grass, do a garden. And one of the chaps that we all know, or most of us know, is Mark with his mobilizing the youth to pick up litter at the rivers occasionally and bringing a message across. So, you know, I think the big trick is how do I, so it comes back to our old Triple C mantra. What is that minimum viable product that can prove to people that this is doable? And then around that minimum viable product is to then say, okay, what are the key figures here? So, you know, in my game, the bank game, my key figures was the 200 mark to become a registered bank. But we started with 12 people. But that was our first key figure. And we could already do a minimum viable product on 12 people and 40,000 Rand. Then after 200 people, my next big thing that we're working towards is 1,000, because at that level, another thing opens up. But my real key figure is 10,000, because at 10,000, I now have the economies of scale from a financial point of view that we can do all sorts of very interesting things like self-insurance, funeral schemes, and you name it. So, you know, so that becomes the tipping point at that level. But I think for each project, there would be this kind of thinking that goes into it. What would be my minimum viable product? Focus on the thing that I can get some people mobilized around it, and then know your key figures and start working towards it.
Thanks, Jasper. There's wisdom there because you've gone through the process. So you can actually, you know, plot those steps because you've had to go through those steps. And so it's, you know, it just builds the picture up and makes sure that we, you know, it's good to have the idea and then you have to start bringing it down into what is possible. So Bisa, what do you make of all of this that we're talking about?
The wise use of money, this actually made me think, you know, but I think that you have to first satisfy, you know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs first, maybe, you know, making sure that food is, you know, is a thing, home, of course, and water and those basic necessities, you know. And Trevor talked about travel. I think that, yes, travel is important, you know, because it recharges the batteries, you know, and it helps you make sense of things so you can think, you know, because you need that time to think so that you can actually process things. And I think that you should also have money for self-improvement, you know. You should make self-improvement a thing by purchasing books, you know, attending seminars, you know, courses so that your mind can be sharp. It is important to have a sharp mind, you know, and I think that you also have to purchase assets, you know, assets that produce money, you know, that generate an income, you know. I'll talk about the best asset allocator ever, you know, in Warren Buffett, for example. He, with Berkshire Hathaway, he bought this company, Geico, insurance company. And with Geico, because because Geico is an insurance company, there's premiums that are paid, you know, every month. And with those premiums, there's what we call float, you know, they generate what you call float. And float is the money that is available because of the claims are not processed immediately, you know, because you pay every month, and you can only claim once. So there's this excess, you know, and Buffett used this flow to purchase new companies so that he can actually generate more assets for Berkshire Hathaway. So I think that you have to purchase assets, you know, and I think that if you have enough money, you have to help others, just give it away and start initiatives that actually help the world, like Ed said, I think that you have to make a mark in the world in a way and make the world a better place, and you have to eat the right things, look after your health, and just, man, wise use of money. Wow, okay. Yes, I think just maybe assets, self-improvement, and just look after yourself, because true wealth is health, Make sure that your mind is sharp so that you can go about the world and change things and implement things. This is a very difficult topic for me, so I'll just leave it there. Thank you, Lee.
Teresa, but you've said a lot. I mean, you've essentially laid the foundations, like a priority list of how to use money wisely. You've got to have food on the table, invest in yourself, in your mind and in your health. And if you had a family, you would add that in. I mean, when I say if you had a family, but family's there. Edward mentioned family. Family becomes a priority. And then build assets that are going to return an ongoing investment. So that all sounds very wise for a 26-year-old. Well done. So Thabiso for president. But I think we've just, my mind is racing, I'll be honest. I get sparked by these ideas, and I'm thinking about tree design, tree wisdom. How can wisdoms and trees be designed, and how can we, so I'm already down that road. And so I think the only thing I want to add in terms of using money wisely, and Trevor said something yesterday, that's the poor can't help the poor. And so what is the responsibility of the wealthy? And I understand myself to be wealthy. I have much more in terms of material goods and opportunities than the vast majority of the population in this world, not just in South Africa, in the world. So I definitely, if anybody was to look at what I have, they would definitely say that I am wealthy. So I am one of those people that have resources. So how do I use those resources wisely? And I'm sitting with the situation at the moment where our domestic worker has been wanting to build a house for years and years and years, and she's been squirreling money away. At the moment, she's bought a plot of land. She owns the land, and at the moment she has a tin shack on it. So now she wants to build a house. She's got enough to build half the house. And she's asked us for a loan for the remainder. And it's not a huge amount of money, but it's enough of an amount of money that it would make a dent in what we don't have currently. Because so she looks at us and she sees, oh, you must have this amount of money available. We don't. And yet, I don't know how to, I feel a sense of responsibility and to the need to share and to give, and because she has so much less. So I definitely have thought about gig for her. And so that was, especially when Jesper spoke about the Malawian the chap from Malawi, I thought actually that's what Lucky needs. But it's about the thinking, isn't it? So it's how to be wise with your own resources and how to help other people to have the will, the passion, and the education to use their own money wisely. Trevor.
And if I may just bring a thread together that I picked up from here, I'm going to ask you a question, Lee. What's your most valuable asset?
My house.
Ed, you see, he's shaking his head. Okay, so let me ask you the question in another way. Who is your most valuable asset? Exactly. Okay. So when Jasper was talking about these volunteers that had actually put all these projects together, that they're actually volunteering, the thought that goes through the average Joe's mind is that it's costing someone nothing. Rubbish. The investment of the individual who is putting their time into volunteering is their most valuable asset that they are investing. And how much is that investment? And if you take these voluntary organizations multiplied by the X or Y value of their personal asset investments into it, it is trillions that is invested into these things. And that's what people miss. This is all about capital, whether it's people capital, it's resource, it's utilizing other things, and that's where we got to get smart. When we talk money, we're actually talking stuff that allows you to buy huge things with the asset that you're actually passing out, whether it's you volunteering your personal asset value or whether it's cash or money. We can't do anything without that. So I'm hoping that socialists or Ed is getting closer together to the ultra.
Well, I would like to suggest, because as Jasper was talking about AA and Salvation Army, and what came to my mind was Doctors Without Borders. And I do wonder if we can't talk about that tomorrow is, you know, and again, it's my curiosity is, how did they start? What does sustain them? And what can we learn from them? So these are huge organizations that are making a significant impact in society. I think about Gift of the Givers. So all of these organizations, what can we learn from them? So let's talk about that tomorrow. Is that okay? Yep. Great. Thanks, everybody. See you tomorrow.
No. What's the topic? What can we learn from?
Yeah. So what can we learn to be from these big volunteer organizations like Alcoholics Anonymous, Doctors Without Borders, and so on? So maybe pick one, learn more about it, share what you've learned, or do a general study. So you've got some homework to do.